Hi, I'm Heather with First Pioneers Federal Credit Union, and welcome to the Money Tips No One Told You podcast. Here at First Pioneers, we love helping you understand your finances better and giving you the tools you need to be financially successful.
And this
Here we're
going
to talk about financial terminology, how different accounts work.
We're
going to share tips that make your financial life easier and
crazy,
so much
astronomical,
more.
out of reach
Are you ready to dive in?
And the truth is, today I want to talk about things to consider before buying your first home. That first home purchase can be so scary. Well, I guess truthfully, it can be scary even if you've done it before. It's such a big purchase. And, we get asked all the time, how do I buy a house? Will I ever be able to buy a house? I've heard young people in particular say that it really scares them and it just feels overwhelming. Some of them to the point that they're not even sure they want to try to do this. But owning a home can be such a wonderful experience, and we don't want to see fear stop you from taking that next step. The truth is, it's not for everyone. Some people prefer to rent, or maybe they live in an area where renting is more the norm. And some people just aren't in that place in their life yet. It's like so many other things in life. You have to consider what's best for you and your circumstances. We just want to make sure that fear is not the thing that's stopping you. And look, I admit it, there are a few things you need to do, but it's really not as difficult as it seems. Just take one step at a time and find people that can help you along the way. You don't have to do this all alone. So let's get started with our first tip, and that is to make sure that you're ready. So ask yourself things like, why are you buying? Are you looking for more space? Is this an investment that maybe you'll rent, or maybe you'll flip it and sell it? Or are you just tired of renting and you're ready to own something? Once you've answered that question, then consider, how do your finances look? Is your income stable? Do you have an emergency fund set aside? And a good suggestion for an emergency fund is at least 3 months of your monthly expenses in a savings account. And then finally, look at what you can afford. So when you look at your budget, what fits? Look at what you pay now. Will it increase? Will it decrease? Maybe you're not paying rent now. So how do you add rent to the budget that you currently have? One word of advice I want to give here: don't plan to have your mortgage for the full amount that can fit in your budget, okay? You want to leave a little bit of wiggle room. There are a lot of things besides your mortgage payment that can change a budget. We've seen it recently. An increase in basic things like groceries and gas can make a big difference in your budget. Or what if you've had a lot of medical bills that are due to an illness? Or maybe even your car insurance has gone up. There are so many things that can change your budget, big and little. And we're going to talk about the mortgage part here in a minute. But you never want to max out how much will fit in your budget. Always leave some room in case things change. Second on our list is to check your credit score. And you can do this by checking your credit report. You can get a free copy once a year from annualcreditreport.com, and I'll put that link in the show notes in case you need to find it. But on this report is where you can see if there are any areas that need work. Now, the big one most of us talk about all the time and people concern themselves with is your credit score, which we've discussed that before in pretty in depth on a previous episode called Talking Credit. So feel free to check that out if you want to know more about your score. But the long and short of it is there's several things that can affect your credit score. One being how much you owe on your various lines of credit. If you have new lines of credit, the length of your credit history, which is how long you've had credit, and your credit mix, so the different types of credit that you have. And of course, the big one is payment history. This is the biggest thing that affects your credit score. I've said it before. I'm sure I will say it multiple times in the future. Pay your bills on time. That has a big effect on your score. And if you don't, it could affect whether lenders are willing to take a chance on you. Another big thing you want to check out on your credit report is, do you have any liens or collections? And if you can, you want to get those paid before you apply for the mortgage. Just like with the score, those things can make a difference not only in getting a loan, but the interest rate you may get for that loan. So now once you know what's going on with your credit, if it's good, keep it that way. If it needs a little work or you have some issues that you need to work on, try to get those handled before you apply. And of course, the big ones is, keep making those payments, make them on time, and try not to open any new lines of credit if you can before you apply for the mortgage. Third on our list, gather the info that you're going to need for your application. Now, of course, some of this is going to be available digitally versus actual printed paperwork, so it may be a little easier to access, but you're still going to need it. So figuring out where it is and how to get your hands on it is a good thing. Most likely, you're going to need 2 years worth of income tax returns. You're going to need pay stubs for at least the last 30 days. And 3 months of bank statements. And keep in mind, if you have multiple accounts, you're going to want the statements for all of those. Lastly, if you're buying with someone like a spouse or partner, you're going to need this info for both of you. So you're going to need to put that on your list of things to do. A couple of other tips for your account info. It could be helpful if you have your down payment in your account and therefore it shows on the statement that you're providing. If you can have that in order before you begin that application process, that can really be helpful. Also, try to avoid any large deposits or withdrawals during this process. Basically, you're wanting your account to look like it would on a normal day. Otherwise, it's kind of difficult for that lender to assess what your finances really look like. Another thing that we do recommend is that you find a mortgage lender to work with. This can be someone at your financial institution. At First Pioneers, you're welcome to come and speak with us about this. The key is to find someone you trust that can help sort of guide you through this whole process. So now you've figured out your budget and you figured out what your credit looks like. It's time to figure out how much you actually qualify for. That takes us to tip number 4, which is pre-approval. This is a place where people get a little tripped up sometimes because there's a pre-qualification and then there's a pre-approval, and those are actually different. Let's start with the pre-qualification. This is where a lender can estimate how much you would likely qualify for and determine what your basic loan terms would look like. And they do this by considering your credit score, the price of the home, your down payment, your monthly debt, and how you want to structure your loan. So for this, there's not what's called a hard hit to your credit. They're just taking an overall look at what's going on. Then there's the pre-approval, and this means you're actually filling out the application, and then the lender will pull your credit report and offer you a loan at a specified rate. A pre-approval is good for 90 days, and it's often needed in order to place an offer on a home. So if you're not going to buy within the next 90 days, you'll likely have to go through that approval process all over again. So keep that in mind and kind of think about the timing of when you want to do those steps. So in this process, you're going to find out the amount that you qualify for, and then that tells you what price range you can shop in when looking for your home. But I want to say it again. Go back to our first point of what can you afford. Just because you qualify for a certain amount doesn't mean that's the amount you should spend. You buy what you can afford and you don't max out your budget, remember? That happened to me when I bought my first home. We qualified for substantially more than we knew we could afford. And it was kind of interesting. It was a bit unexpected. I didn't expect them to tell me that we could qualify for that much. But again, we knew we couldn't afford that much. So we went shopping and eventually purchased a home that was in the range that we could afford, not what we qualified for. So now that you have an idea of what you can afford, we move on to number 5 on our list, which I think is the most fun part, and that is determining what kind of home you want. And this goes beyond the price. Think about size and location. Do you need to consider a specific area for school or for where you work? How many bedrooms would you like? Do you need other things like an office space or a yard for a dog? Now's the time to start thinking about your wants and needs. And dare I say, start looking at homes and find the one that's the perfect match for you. For that, we recommend looking for a real estate agent, which is number 6 on our list. Now, this can be someone you know, or even ask around. Ask some people you trust for a recommendation. Find out who they used when they bought their home. Look, I believe a level of trust is important throughout this entire process, and that goes for your real estate person as well. They can help you narrow down listings, and their knowledge is just invaluable and a huge help so that you can find what you need out of your home. I want to offer a little tip on real estate that I actually learned when I was buying my first home. Most of the time, your agent just works for or represents you, so they can make recommendations on what you should offer on a home and things like that. There are times, however, that the home they show you is one that they have listed. So in this case, they legally can't recommend what you do, because at that point, they represent both you and the seller. And at that point, it would be considered a conflict of interest if they make recommendations on either side of that transaction. Now, if this does come up, they should share that information with you and be completely transparent about it. I mean, that's part of their job and what they do. I just wanted you to know that so that you kind of understand what's happening. I know when it happened with us, I was a bit confused because I didn't really understand how all of that worked. So it's just a little tip to keep in mind. Next, I want to go over some costs that go into buying and owning a home, which takes us into number 7 and down payments. And this seems to be the thing that scares people the most. They think they can't afford the down payment. It's as if it's some crazy, astronomical, out of reach number. And the truth is, most of the time, that's just not the case. Down payments required depends on the type of loan that you get. I've seen down payments be as low as 3% of the loan. So let's say you had a $200,000 home. Well, 3% of that is only $6,000. So it may not be quite as out of reach as it seems. Also consider that there are loan assistance programs that may be able to help you. And there are even some loan types that allow you to finance 100% of your purchase. So in that case, you wouldn't even need a down payment. Look, I know this probably sounds a bit overwhelming in and of itself, doesn't it? But the truth is, your lender is going to help you with the different types of loans. You're not expected to know all of that when you walk in the door. It's just a matter of finding the one that's right for you and the one that fits your circumstances. Now, don't forget what we said before. For whatever down payment you do need, if you can, try to have that ready before you actually apply for the mortgage. So now that we've covered the down payment, I want to talk about some other costs to be aware of when you buy a home. And this is tip number 8. That's the closing costs that are paid at the time of purchase. I know for a lot of people, this can be a bit scary and confusing because they really don't know what it all means. So let me explain what the closing costs are. That's going to be the fees for the attorneys that are involved. They're doing the titles and all those things. The pest inspection on the home, the appraisal on the home, which needs to be done to know the value, and then also escrow, which we're going to get to in just a second. Now, these costs are usually between 2 and 5% of your total loan amount. So you can do it like we did with the down payment. We had the $200,000 home. 3% of that was $6,000 for the down payment. So the same thing you would do here. Look at the loan amount and then do the percentage for the closing cost. But here's the thing to remember. There are ways you can get help with closing costs. Sometimes you can ask the seller to pay the cost. Sometimes it can be rolled into the loan so that you don't have to come out of pocket with that money right then. Again, a lot of these are factors that are going to depend on the type of loan that you secure. But just be aware that there are ways you can save on those costs. So make sure you ask the question to your lender of, hey, what is that going to mean for the closing cost? What am I going to need when we close on the house? Okay. Now I said I was going to go back to escrow, and I do want to take a second and explain that because I remember when someone said escrow, I had no idea what that meant when we bought our first house. So I'm going to give you the legal definition. It is an arrangement in which a third party temporarily holds money or property until a particular condition has been met, such as the fulfillment of a purchase agreement, like a mortgage. And I know that was really long and it may have been confusing, but let's do the shorter version. Basically, it's used in real estate transactions. And what it means is throughout the term of your mortgage, so however long you have your mortgage on your home, there's going to be an escrow account set up for you. And this is going to be at the place that you pay your mortgage. So for me, it's at my financial institution. That account is going to take a certain amount of money out of the total mortgage amount that you pay, and they're going to set it aside. And they're going to pay your taxes and your homeowner's insurance with that money. They're going to do it on your behalf out of that account. So your total mortgage amount is going to include enough for those funds. Basically, it's kind of all happening behind the scenes. You just pay the mortgage. They're going to take care of your taxes and your homeowner's insurance. And the escrow is simply what the account is called. I hope that makes sense. But one reason I wanted to go over this and for you to keep it in mind is if you're online looking at homes or maybe using a mortgage calculator or something like that, it probably won't give you a true amount for your mortgage because that escrow amount won't be in there. So when you're out there using a mortgage calculator trying to figure out how much can I afford on this home, don't solely rely on that for the amount of the mortgage, okay? Because you're going to have to add those other things into that amount when they close on the house. Again, any questions that you have, feel free to ask. Talk to your lender. Go to your financial institution. Say, hey, I don't understand how this works. And they can help you break it down so that you understand before you go into the home buying process. Before we move on from the escrow, let's talk about the homeowner's insurance real quick. This is paid through your mortgage out of that escrow account, but we want to go back to budgeting for how much you want to pay for a mortgage. Your mortgage can actually fluctuate slightly from year to year depending on if your insurance goes up or goes down. So that's why I said don't max out that budget amount. You want to make sure you have wiggle room in case that mortgage amount changes slightly. A few other things to consider when it comes to cost, and again, goes back to that budget. Want to make sure you leave room to pay for these kinds of things. Is the home you're buying new, or is it going to require any repairs or renovations? Is there a homeowners association where this home is located? Those often come with fees, and they have rules that you have to follow as far as upkeep and things like that with your home. Now, your real estate agent should know about that if you're looking at a home like that, so ask them to help you find that information out as far as the homeowners association. But then there's also the basic upkeep and repairs on a home. And if you're coming from an apartment, those are things that your landlord most likely took care of for you. But now, once you own, those things will be your responsibility. That's same if you lived with your parents. There were probably things they were handling at your home that you may not even have been aware of. And of course, that'll be your responsibility now. Your roof is going to get old. Your air conditioner is going to get old and eventually break. You may someday want to redo your kitchen or your bathroom. And then there's also little things like items for your yard, your landscaping. Do you have a lawnmower? These are all things you get to do now. And they're all expenses that you consider as you take on that new responsibility. So again, when you're working on that budget and how much you can afford, you want to leave some room to save for these kinds of things to make sure that you can take care of them. Okay, now I want you to stop for a minute and I want you to really hear this and really listen to me. I know this feels like a lot to consider and to think about, but really don't be scared. Take a breath and realize you can do this, okay? It's just things to think about as you move forward. Just plan it out. Make some notes about what you'd like to do. Make your budget, and you're going to settle into it in no time, I promise. And again, trust me when I say you are not alone. Ask questions of us here at the credit union. Ask questions of friends that are doing this. We've all been here. We've all gone through this. It's just a matter of kind of settling into those plans and figuring out how you're going to step forward. So now, let's go to our last couple points. Let's go to number 9. You've reached that place where you found a home that you like and you're considering buying. Before you do that, hire an inspector. These are people that they come and look at the home and they help you know if there's any issues that maybe you need to consider. They look at the roof, the foundation, the AC unit, all of it. And then if there are issues, especially something that's maybe a higher cost to repair it, it could potentially be a point of negotiation on the asking price for the home. For example, let's say the roof is really old and it's going to need replacing really soon. Maybe you ask the seller, hey, can you reduce the asking price an amount that's equal to a new roof? So maybe they reduce it, $10,000. The other option may be to ask the seller to complete the repairs and then leave the asking price the same. But then that way you don't have to worry about making those repairs. I remember my first home needed some things done and it was going to total around $5,000. And of course that was many years ago. So $5,000 was more than it is now. And so we asked, hey, you think you could reduce the price on the home a bit for these repairs? And the owner says, you know what, we'll make those repairs for you, which actually worked out great for us because then we didn't have to worry about doing that work before we moved in. I mean, moving in and doing all this can be stressful enough. So having the home just ready to move in was a big deal for us. So just keep those things in mind. An inspector can be really helpful to truly know the condition of the home before you buy. So we've reached our final tip. It is the last one, but it is certainly not the least one. Now that you've found your home, go get that loan. And look, we've said it before, there's several types of loans. They all have pros and cons. We recommend that you find a mortgage lender that you can trust, that will guide you through this process, and they will help you find the very best financial situation they can for you. And these people exist, I promise. Ask your family, ask your friends who they trusted, who they used when they bought their home. Start with the place that you do your finances. Start with your credit union. But know this, you don't have to get a loan there if it doesn't work for you. I'm not trying to say you have to come to First Pioneers to get a loan if that's what you need to do. We would love it. We would love if you joined our family. But go where you're comfortable. And I wonder how many times I'm going to say this on this podcast. Ask questions. Ask what you don't understand. And if you're working with someone who is not willing to explain those things to you and you feel like it's not being helpful with you, find someone else. Find someone who will. And of course, I have a bonus tip for the day. You know I did, right? Keep physical copies of your paperwork. And I know that may sound strange. We're so cloud-based these days and so many things are online somewhere. But it really is a good idea to have a copy of things like your deed, your closing disclosure, and other important documents that you may have been given when you closed. We recommend keeping them in something like a fireproof box or a cabinet that's locked. Anyone that's on that loan should also know where these documents are and how to access them in case of an emergency. And like I said, I know in the day and age that we live in this age of technology that may sound crazy, but you truly never know what may happen where your documents are being stored. So having a copy for yourself can actually really be helpful. I'm actually going to share one more little story with you today that I think is a good example of why our bonus tip is important. I actually sold my home, my first home, in fact, on one day. The next day, I bought a new home. And then the day after that, Hurricane Katrina hit South Louisiana. Now, the buildings where our documents were to be processed were either destroyed or were not operational, actually for quite some time. There were also major issues with power, internet, really anything technology-based for weeks and even months after the storm hit. So having our own copies of all of our mortgage information actually proved to be truly helpful. So that's why I say you really never know why you might need something. So it's just a good idea to keep your own copy of your paperwork. Look, I know this process can be so confusing and really overwhelming if you let it, but it doesn't have to be. Like we said, make a list of your questions and come talk to us. There are people here that are ready to take you by the hand and guide you through this whole process and help you find your perfect first home. Are you ready? Thank you so much for listening today. We hope you found this information helpful, and we'd love it if you'd give us a rating. And don't forget to favorite or subscribe to the show. There are several ways you can find us if you need further information or you need to speak with a financial counselor. You can visit us in person in Lafayette or New Iberia, Louisiana, or you can find us at firstpioneers.com. There you can find out how to become a member of our family and find out other financial information. Be sure and check out the show notes for important links and other information. And as always, we're here to help in any way that we can. We hope you have a great day, and we'll see you next time.